Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to WatchYouWant.com. Thanks for logging on. Now, one of the most common questions that I receive here at Watch You Want concerning the high-end watches we carry is the difference between a traditional Royal Oak and a Royal Oak offshore. It seems a lot of collectors who are coming from other brands, or maybe other areas of the hobby, or maybe are tackling the hobby with renewed vigor and greater depth of enthusiasm, they want to know what the difference is between the original Gerald Genta Royal Oak and the model that came out 20 years after it, Emanuel Geit's Royal Oak Offshore. Now, the Offshore and the original Royal Oak have both had reams written about them on the internet, so it seems like the terms are thrown around indiscriminately, and I can understand, coming from a different part of the hobby, why it might be a little confusing, and there may be some basic questions that need answering concerning exactly what a Royal Oak Offshore is, what makes it special, and what makes it different, basically, from a Royal Oak. And so in order to tackle those distinctions, it's best to go over a little bit of history. The Royal Oak was released in 1972, right at the onset of the quartz crisis by Audemars Piguet. It was revolutionary because at the time it integrated a stainless steel sports watch and the absolute top shelf of the luxury watch market. It was a stainless steel watch with a completely integrated stainless steel bracelet. This itself was a little bit revolutionary, not because it hadn't been done before, but because it had never been done at this price, with this degree of finishing and integration, and with a $3,500 MSRP in the early 70s, it was more than 10 times as expensive as a contemporary Rolex Submariner. So that was scandalous at the time, and it took a couple of years for the concept to catch on. Fast forward 20 years later, now we're looking at the Royal Oak Offshore. Audemars Piguet's celebrating the 20th anniversary of the original Royal Oak. They asked one of their designers, 21-year-old Emanuel Geit, to pen something that would bring the Audemars Piguet buyer demographic down a few notches from, shall we say, the mature crowd that they were drawing at the time to something a little bit more in line with the hip youngsters that were sporting the new Breitlings, Omegas, and Rolex sport watches. Try to introduce them to something a little bit more upscale. Attract them with an exotic combination of perhaps size, shape, and materials, and that's exactly what Geit did. But I don't think anyone expected him to be as extreme as he was, because when the 42mm original Royal Oak Offshore debuted in 1992 at the Basel World Watch and Jewelry Show, it was a jaw-dropper, and not always for the right reasons. The original designer of the Royal Oak, Gerald Genta, thought it was a monstrosity. And again, like the original, it took a few years for it to catch on. It combined a couple of key differences that set it apart from the original Royal Oak and gave it an identity that was all its own. Now, the key to any Royal Oak is the octagonal bezel and the 8 white gold bolts. Here in the Offshore, you can see that they're retained, but what's key is that the bezel is so much larger. It's set so much farther above the case. And for the first time in a Royal Oak, the gasket that seals the watch between the bezel and the case isn't just visible, but it's actually pronounced. The expression of the assembly of the water sealing system is part of the machine ethic of the Royal Oak Offshore that just takes it a rung above the complexity and the outlandish experimentation of the original Royal Oak. Also silicone combined on the pushers and the crown, whereas the original Royal Oak was revolutionary for combining stainless steel with a big price and fine finishing. The Offshore combined the rubber gasket with the outsized proportions and the bold forms and the silicone pushers, and this was considered incredibly audacious at the time, much more complex than the original. It was both an automatic winder and a chronograph. Critically, the original Offshore of 92, on sale in 93, was a chronograph. So the Offshore chronograph is the origin of the species, so to speak, when we speak of offshores. Originally, the model was powered by a Jaeger-LeCoultre base movement, a model 889 with a Dubois de Praz chronograph module on top of that. That's why you'll always see the sunken date on an Offshore that you don't see on a regular Royal Oak, because there's a chronograph module on top of a base movement, and the base movement actually contains the date. So that date disc is down there below the module, so you look through a magnifier into the guts of the watch and you see the date. That's one of the ways you can tell if a Royal Oak is a fake, basically. If the date is flush with the dial, fake. Now, in time, the Royal Oak also, the Offshore, developed its own unique dial expression. Instead of the small waffle tapisserie of the original Royal Oak, Audemars evolved this larger mega tapisserie waffle pattern cut, Like everything else about the watch, it's bigger, bolder, and it's just more expressive. Another feature in time is that the original JLC movement, being relatively smaller, had an anti-magnetic case inside a case. So if you take the back off of this older rubber clad, you'll see that there's a magnetic soft iron shield to resist magnetism around the movement. This is useful if you're around high-powered electronics, speakers, subwoofers, things of that like. In return for losing that shell on the in-house movement of the later Royal Oak offshores, you get a much finer timepiece. Perhaps not as rugged around magnetic flux, but if you open this case back, it's beautifully finished. It's everything you would expect of a holy trinity watch manufacturer like Audemars Piguet. They're up there with Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin. And the ultimate sign of integrity is the finish where you can't see it. Open this watch up and it's a feast for the eyes and a celebration of craft art and Swiss watchmaking. Now both of these watches are 42 millimeters in diameter. Today there is a 44 millimeter Royal Oak offshore model, and there has been for the last couple of years. There are a few freakish 48 millimeter variants going by the name of the Shack, or several variations of the Arnold Schwarzenegger limited editions. Not all Arnolds are 48, but on the rare occasions that you encounter a 48, it was usually built for the wrist of the Terminator or Shack. Again, this is the 42 and it's the original, and I find this wears the best. Now, for the most part, offshores come on straps, either rubber or what's known as a hornback gaiter. Very tough, but surprisingly supple. They feel good on the wrist. There are some out there with bracelets. Be warned, if you don't like a super heavy watch, I'm not sure you should be looking at offshores to begin with, but you can get by with the hornback or the rubber. Add a metal bracelet and they become really hefty. Now, there have been a couple of other detail changes over the years. Both of these watches feature the later strap plots, which allow you to interchange rubber, leather, and metal bracelets. The earlier watches, mostly prior to the year 2000, they featured a different type of lug that featured one point of attachment, and you can't interchange straps and bracelets on those. So if you're going to buy an offshore, know the generation and know whether you prefer straps or bracelets ahead of time. It'll save you a headache and a nasty surprise. There are many limited editions available. I've read that there are over 120 variations of the 42 millimeter Royal Oak offshore. So if you're shopping offshores, you've got a lot of selection, but again, it means you need to know your watches and really do your homework to get the one that sings to you. There are rubber bezels, there are steel bezels, there's precious metal. They exist in forged carbon, they exist in exotic materials like ceramic, combinations thereof. There's a lot of variety with offshores. They're all tough watches, they're all well-built watches. Again, they are one of the most forged watches on earth, so if you're going to buy one, first buy the seller. A company like WatchYouWant.com will always vet a watch. Papers, provenance, boxes, papers, and we have a professional watchmaker on staff who goes over every watch we bring in with a fine-toothed comb before it's listed. So if you have any questions about Audemars Piguet Royal Oaks or Royal Oak offshores, like this Royal Oak offshore Panda or this Royal Oak offshore Rubberclad, contact us at WatchYouWant.com. My name's Tim. I'm actually the horology officer here. I make the videos, I write the blogs and the articles, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about these or any other Royal Oak offshore models. We're here to help. We are the pre-owned luxury watch leaders, and we're confident that if you check out our website, get in touch with us, we talk the talk, we walk the walk, and we can help you find the watch you want.